I know some of us are tired of the Disney movies that will last, I guess, until we all dead. But I think at some point we've all thought about what powers we'd have if we could. And I think that imagination makes us feel
it's just different.
I want to say right off the bat that Invincible is a great show. So Invincible is about Mark Grayson, the son of the most powerful superhero in the known universe, who has been waiting 18 years to finally develop his powers. Now, of course, besides the kind of generic, discovering your powers, trying to figure out with great power comes great responsibility. And I think this show does a good job because it kind of deviates for the most part from the generic, just find your powers out, find out, who you are, growing up, puberty stuff. And it kind of focuses on kind of the reality of fatigue of being a superhero, or really being responsible for people, for the large protection of society, and how that really weighs on a person. It's almost like war in a sense. A lot of these superheroes have PTSD from almost dying themselves, from seeing so many people massacred, from having to fight the same kind of villains over and over because the system keeps letting them out, or because they keep breaking out, and because they don't want to ultimately break, the superhero rule of having to kill, because that's a lot of times for a lot of superheroes the line that they draw for themselves that makes them different than the villains that they're fighting themselves. And I think what I like the most is that it is another example of how animation is kind of being pushed a little bit more into not just being looked at as kind of like a kid's thing. We've kind of grown beyond the idea of something like The Simpsons being like the too hot for TV, and we've gone way past that with South Park and Family Guy. But we've even gone past that where animation doesn't have to be irreverent and just a comedy. I mean, we even got a Killing Joke where Batgirl and Batman bang on the rooftop and in the middle of the day. So it's pretty dope. Much like Invincible, I'm enjoying this new preference in nuancing our understanding of what it means to be a hero and a villain. And one of the shows that exemplify this most is The Boys. Now, admittedly, I was pretty late on the train of watching this. I've seen a lot of the CW, DC TV shows, and the Marvel ones from Netflix. And The Boys initially kind of looked like, it was supposed to be like a parody kind of comedy thing. And initially, I wasn't really interested. But man, once I watched it, I am here to preach the gospel of The Boys. You have our main character, Huey, who's just hanging out with his girlfriend. And, they're doing lovey-dovey romantic stuff. And before you kind of get sick of it, his girlfriend explodes into a pile of blood and and just viscera. Because what ends up happening to her is their version of the Flash, who's called A-Train, unfortunately speeds right through his girlfriend. And in a manic rush, he kind of just like, look, I gotta go, and he keeps going. And so Huey kind of has to deal with the aftermath of his girlfriend being killed by what is essentially one of the Justice League. He receives no apology.
She just stepped in the middle of the street.
She was a half step off the fucking curb.
The Justice League isn't just like some entity out of space somewhere that's dealing with their own council. They're actually a part of conglomeration. So they have lawyers, they have promoters and marketers, and Huey's kind of hounded by all of them essentially to stay quiet because they don't need the bad publicity essentially. And they kind of, when you're put in a heroic position, a position of power, you're we all know you're kind of above the law to a certain extent. So it's about Huey getting revenge because superheroes, he finds out, are very much above the law.
I never broke the law. I am the law.
Now, of course, that synopsis doesn't do it justice because they really dig into how superheroes, I think, would actually be treated in our kind of world, where it's not like there's a bunch of like really altruistic people who develop are given superpowers, and they all just become good and they only do good. They become part of the machine. They become marketable. They become products and services that a company would sell. And I think this kind of viewpoint of superheroes is becoming increasingly desired. We're used to seeing superheroes be kind of like uncompromisingly good, ultimately altruistic. But the idea that these people, these heroes that we see have been seen as unfallible, become drunks, become sex addicts, become predators, because it gives us an understanding that even those who are in power have flaws, and sometimes their flaws are a lot more messed up than our own. And I think that gives a lot of writers a heck of a lot more leeway beyond the use of powers for good versus evil. How does one survive in a world where at any moment in time you could be obliterated like that? And I think we even see this kind of cross lines in a lot of different ways. For example, One Punch Man, as big of a comedy as that is, it also deals with a world where heroes are part of a corporation, that they have levels, that they have to be more marketable. They you have to be strong to a certain extent, but they want to be able to sell you and your services to the world. And it just talks about how like the politics for both The Boys and One Punch Man, how the politics at times are at odds with what really needs to be done for and with humanity. We even see this in My Hero Academia, as Deku gets further and further into professional heroism. He sees how fragile the reality of the danger of the inconsistency of the hero society is, and that's ultimately, for all of these shows, what creates the villains. They're kind of tired of this idea that heroes are ultimately always good, that they don't make mistakes. And I think for us here in our universe and the reality we live in, we're kind of getting to that point as well. We want to see flawed heroes. We want to see them take on interesting and sometimes morally flexible decisions. When you mix in the reality that we are all of nuance in our morality, in our ethics, and our understanding, with somebody who has the power to blow up a planet, then you have so many more things to play with. I'm hoping to see more in the future. Unfortunately, since Disney takeover, a lot of the Marvel shows have been kind of, they've been okay. I really did like the Netflix Marvel shows, but I think the reason that the Netflix Marvel shows were so good because they were also at kind of like a human ground level. These were, as they are in the comics, the Defenders, these were kind of like the street level people. Like, as much as going on with the world ending villainy and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter to people on the streets because they still have to deal with the neighborhood. Like, as much as somebody can blow up the planet, there's somebody who might live next door that can blow up your block. And then you still got to deal with going to work and going to school possibly, and just like real life adult kind of struggles. And the fact that these kind of superheroes were in the mix of that, I think made it more impactful. But I like to see more supernatural shows and movies like The Boys, something like Invincible, like Netflix's Daredevil, or Jessica Jones was really interesting because it dealt not just with like the superhero stuff and the personal stuff, but it dealt with PTSD and like trauma. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, overall, I'll say, because I've been talking too much as it is, that I just like when they play with the world instead of just having it focus on pure good versus evil superheroism stuff. That nuance, I think, makes great writing. But let me know what you think. What superhero shows or films have been interesting that you feel like really pushed the narrative? Let me know what you think of The Boys, as well as Invincible. I know the comic and the animation is very different, as is typical of the transfers of media. But also let me know what kind of nuances would you like to see folks take? Not even just in the superhero genre, but like in anything. One thing that I've been thinking about that'd be really, really interesting if they could make a grittier, more realistic, like fantasy world, kind of like a combination of like Being Human and The Wire. I think that'd be just crazy.